Ladies and gentlemen, here's a powerful neuroscience-informed speech in the style of Andrew Huberman, direct, research-backed, and emotionally grounded. It blends biology, psychology, and practical advice without overpromising. The style focuses on empowering people with real tools to rewire their brain and reclaim control. Pain, whether emotional or physical, is often misunderstood. It's commonly seen as something to avoid, something to fight against, or even something that defines us. However, pain is not a sign of weakness or failure. In fact, it is the body's way of telling us that something needs our attention, whether it's a sharp ache from an injury or a deep, lingering sadness from a personal loss. Pain carries critical information about our current state and environment. The truth is, pain is a fundamental part of being human, and in order to master it, we must first understand it. The first step in mastering pain is recognizing that it is not an enemy. Pain is a signal, a message from our nervous system, a reminder that something is out of balance, be it physical, emotional, or psychological. Think about the body's response to injury, the immediate sharp pain that makes you stop, look, and assess what's happening. This response is meant to protect you. It compels you to take action, whether it's moving away from a harmful situation, seeking medical attention, or adjusting how you move to prevent further harm. Without pain, we would be unaware of these threats and potentially exacerbate our injuries. This same mechanism applies to emotional pain. When you experience heartache, grief, anxiety, or stress, the pain often serves a purpose, too. It draws attention to the areas in your life where you may feel vulnerable, misunderstood, or disconnected. It highlights unresolved issues or unhealed wounds, signaling that there's work to be done. Much like physical pain, emotional pain is an alert that you must address something. Often, we try to numb emotional pain through avoidance, distraction, or repression, but this only prolongs suffering and prevents us from learning from the experience. Understanding pain involves embracing its role as a messenger. Rather than seeing it as an obstacle, we need to recognize it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to grow, to strengthen, and to develop resilience. The human brain and nervous system are incredibly plastic. They can adapt, evolve, and rewire themselves in response to experiences. Pain is often a catalyst for this transformation. By acknowledging pain, we don't allow it to define us or cripple us. We use it to fuel personal growth. Once we see pain as data, the next step is to examine it closely. What exactly is causing this pain? Is it the physical injury from a fall? Or is it the emotional weight of a past experience that is being triggered in the present? Is the pain coming from a recent rejection, an old belief about your worth, or the fear of a future you can't control? Each type of pain is unique and its source may be complex. But the more we identify and dissect its origins, the more we empower ourselves to address it effectively. Consider the practice of mindfulness, which has been proven to help people cope with both physical and emotional pain. By becoming more aware of the sensations in our body and the thoughts in our mind, we can begin to separate ourselves from the pain. Instead of reacting impulsively to avoid or suppress the discomfort, we learn to observe it. We acknowledge that the pain is there, but it does not have to govern our actions. This simple shift in perspective is crucial because it creates a space between the stimulus, thus the pain, and our response to it. This space allows us to decide how to move forward instead of reacting reflexively. Pain also teaches us a fundamental truth about our physiology. Our nervous system is wired for defense. This is a survival mechanism that has evolved over millennia to help us respond to danger. However, in the modern world, we often experience pain that isn't life-threatening, yet our nervous system reacts as though it is. Emotional pain, stress, and anxiety activate the same pathways as physical threats. Our body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, preparing us to fight or flee. Unfortunately, many of us stay in this heightened state of arousal for long periods, which leads to chronic stress, burnout, and poor health. Understanding this response is vital because it gives us the power to control it. We are not helpless to our pain. Through practices like controlled breathing, meditation, and cognitive restructuring, we can recalibrate our nervous system and reduce the intensity of our reactions. We can teach our body that not all pain is catastrophic, that we have the ability to manage it, and that we can even transform it into something empowering. By rethinking how we view and interact with pain, we begin to unlock our true potential. Pain is not a sentence. It is a phase, a moment in time that can lead to transformation. It's a process. We don't need to rush through it or seek to bypass it. We can sit with it, learn from it, and use it to become stronger, more resilient, and more self-aware. Once we begin to accept and understand pain in this way, we are no longer victims of our circumstances. Instead, we become active participants in our healing and growth. Nobody and nothing will ever hurt us again, not because pain will never come our way, but because we will have the tools to face it head on with wisdom, control, and an unshakable sense of strength. The human nervous system is intricately designed for survival. From an evolutionary standpoint, it has been honed to prioritize defense. This is why, when faced with threats, whether physical or psychological, our bodies and minds react quickly, often before we even have time to think. This rapid, reflexive response to perceived danger, known as the flight or reaction, is a fundamental aspect of our survival mechanism. However, in the modern world, this system, while incredibly adaptive in dangerous situations, can often become overactive, leading to chronic stress, anxiety, and physical ailments when the threats we face aren't life-threatening. The good news is that while our nervous system is wired for defense, it can also be rewired for strength, resilience, and emotional balance. At the core of the nervous system lies the autonomic nervous system, ANSEC, which is responsible for controlling involuntary functions such as heart rate, digestion, and respiratory rate. This system has two main branches, the sympathetic nervous system, SNS, and the parasympathetic nervous system, NPNSS. The SNS is the one that prepares the body for action in response to stress. It increases heart rate, diverts blood to muscles, and releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This is the fight or flight response that helps us deal with immediate threats, like encountering a predator or escaping a dangerous situation. The PNS, on the other hand, helps the body return to a state of rest and recovery, promoting healing, digestion, and overall calm. While this system was essential in ancestral environments, it can become problematic when the SNS is constantly activated, even in the absence of real danger. In our fast-paced, modern world, many people experience heightened levels of stress from daily pressures like work, social obligations, and personal challenges. As a result, the sympathetic nervous system remains in overdrive, keeping us in a constant state of alertness and tension. This chronic activation of the fight or flight response can lead to a variety of health problems, including anxiety, depression, insomnia, heart disease, and digestive issues. The key to overcoming this cycle of constant stress lies in our ability to shift the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. So this is where the concept of rewiring the nervous system comes into play. Just as our bodies can adapt to physical challenges through exercise, our brains and nervous systems can be trained to respond more effectively to stress, fostering a sense of calm and strength rather than constant vigilance and tension. The process of rewiring the nervous system involves conscious effort, but the rewards are immense: improved emotional regulation, enhanced resilience, and a greater sense of well-being. One of the most effective ways to rewire the nervous system is through breath work. Controlled deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So triggering a relaxation response in the body. Simple techniques like diaphragmatic breathing, where you inhale deeply into the belly and exhale slowly, can help to lower heart rate, reduce stress hormone levels, and promote a sense of calm. By practicing breath work regularly, you can teach your body to shift out of the fight or flight response and into a more balanced, relaxed state. Over time, this rewiring of the nervous system becomes automatic, allowing you to handle stressful situations with greater ease and clarity. Mindfulness meditation is another powerful tool for rewiring the nervous system. By focusing attention on the present moment without judgment, you can break the cycle of stress and anxiety that often arises from rumination and worry. Studies have shown that regular mindfulness practice can increase the thickness of the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for higher cognitive functions like decision-making, impulse control, and emotional regulation. Means that through mindfulness, you can strengthen your ability to pause, assess, and respond thoughtfully to stress rather than reacting impulsively. Over time, this rewires the brain to become more resilient and less reactive to emotional triggers. Another key to rewiring the nervous system is exercise. Physical activity, particularly activities that challenge the body in new ways, such as strength training, yoga, or high-intensity interval training, HIIT, can help regulate the autonomic nervous system. Exercise promotes the release of endorphins, the body's natural mood enhancers, and also increases the efficiency of the parasympathetic nervous system. When we engage in physical activity, we create an opportunity for the body to move from a state of high arousal, sympathetic activation, to a state of recovery and restoration, parasympathetic activation. This shift not only helps reduce stress in the moment, but also strengthens the overall resilience of the nervous system, making it more adaptable to future stressors. In addition to breath work, mindfulness, and exercise, nutrition plays a crucial role in rewiring the nervous system. A diet rich in nutrients that support brain health, such as omega-3 fatty acids, antioxidants, and magnesium, can help reduce inflammation and oxidative stress, which are linked to chronic anxiety and depression. On the other hand, excessive consumption of caffeine, sugar, and processed foods can exacerbate stress responses and impair the functioning of the nervous system. By fueling your body with the right nutrients, you create an environment where the nervous system can thrive, repair, and adapt to challenges more effectively. Rewiring the nervous system is not a quick fix. It's a process that requires consistency and patience. However, the effort is well worth it. As you begin to train your nervous system to respond more calmly to stress, you'll find that not only do you handle external challenges with greater ease, but you also become more in tune with your internal state. How do we? You gain greater control over your emotional responses and develop the ability to stay centered, even in the face of adversity. Over time, this rewiring leads to greater strength, both physical and mental. By mastering your nervous system, you reclaim the power to respond to life's challenges, not from a place of fear, but from a place of inner resilience and confidence. In moments of stress, anxiety, or conflict, it's easy to slip into automatic reactions. These reactions are often fast, intense, and driven by emotion, with little to no conscious thought behind them. This is because the brain's default mode in situations of perceived threat is to activate the fight or flight response, which prioritizes immediate action over reflection or control. However, with awareness and conscious breath work, we can create a gap between the stimulus, whether it's an external event or internal feeling, and our reaction to it. This gap is where control resides, and it is the space where we choose a more measured, mindful response, rather than simply reacting on autopilot. The concept of creating a gap between reaction and control begins with understanding how our brain and nervous system work in times of stress. When we experience something that triggers an emotional reaction, such as a confrontation with a colleague or a stressful situation at home, our brain immediately processes the stimulus and activates the sympathetic nervous system. This is the body's fight or flight mechanism designed to help us survive threats by preparing us for quick action. Heart rate increases, blood flows to the muscles, and stress hormones like adrenaline flood the bloodstream. In this heightened state, we feel the urge to either fight, flee, or freeze. The problem is that this rapid response leaves little room for reflection or mindful decision-making. This is where the power of awareness comes in. Awareness acts as a tool that allows us to observe our thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations without immediately reacting to them. By bringing our attention to the present moment, we can create space between the stimulus and our reaction. In this space, we can become aware of the physiological changes occurring in our body. Racing heart, shallow breathing, tight muscles. And notice the automatic impulses rising within us. When we simply notice what is happening inside us, we disrupt the immediate emotional reaction. Awareness creates an opportunity for us to decide how we want to respond instead of just being carried away by the intensity of our emotions. The second key element to creating the gap is conscious breath. Our breath is deeply connected to our nervous system, and it has the ability to either activate or calm the stress response. When we are stressed or anxious, our breathing becomes shallow and rapid, which further activates the sympathetic nervous system, increasing feelings of anxiety and stress. However, when we intentionally slow down our breath and focus on deep diaphragmatic breathing, we signal to the body that it is safe, activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest response. This shift from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic system reduces the intensity of the emotional reaction and creates the space we need to pause and reflect. Breathwork is one of the most accessible tools for creating that gap between stimulus and reaction. Techniques like deep belly breathing or box breathing, where you inhale for a count of 4, hold for full 4, exhale for 4, and hold again for 4, can immediately bring the body back into a state of calm and balance. By practicing breathwork regularly, we train the nervous system to respond more quickly to stress with a calmer, more controlled state. This doesn't mean the stress or trigger will go away, but it allows us to approach it with greater clarity, composure, and focus. The gap between reaction and control is also enhanced by mindful awareness, which allows us to observe our thoughts without becoming them. Often, our immediate emotional reactions are fueled by thoughts that are exaggerated or untrue. For example, in a moment of conflict, our mind automatically assumes that we're being personally attacked, leading to a defensive reaction. When we pause and bring awareness to these thoughts, we can begin to disentangle ourselves from them. By recognizing that thoughts are not facts and that our emotions, while valid, do not necessarily reflect objective reality, we can create space for a more thoughtful, intentional response. This helps us shift from reactive, emotionally driven behavior to proactive, mindful decision-making. Another crucial aspect of awareness is body awareness. Our bodies give us valuable information about what's happening inside us, but we often overlook these signals in our rush to act. The body's stress response is often felt physically: tightness in the chest, a racing heart, clenched fists. By becoming more attuned to these sensations, we can better understand when our body is entering a state of heightened stress. This awareness can act as an early warning system, giving us the chance to intervene before we become fully overwhelmed. When we notice our body's stress signals, we can consciously relax the areas of tension, regulate our breathing, and shift our mindset. This physical awareness serves as a cue to slow down, create the gap, and regain control. Creating a gap between reaction and control also involves a shift in perspective. Instead of seeing stressors as threats to our well-being, we can begin to see them as opportunities for growth. When we are aware of our emotions and our physiological responses, we begin to realize that we have the power to choose how we want to respond. Stress no longer becomes an enemy to fight against, but a signal to pause, recalibrate, and choose a course of action aligned with our values and goals. This shift from automatic reactivity to conscious control is a powerful form of emotional intelligence. The ability to create a gap between reaction and control is not something that happens overnight. It requires practice, patience, and a commitment to mindfulness. But over time, as we strengthen our awareness and deepen our connection to our breath, this gap expands and our ability to respond thoughtfully in stressful situations increases. With practice, we can learn to navigate even the most challenging circumstances with a sense of calm and control, confident in our ability to choose our responses rather than be controlled by our emotions. In the world we live in today, there's a constant pull toward immediate gratification. From social media to fast food, from streaming services to impulsive purchases, we are surrounded by cues that encourage quick decisions, reactions, and emotions. This environment can make it difficult to cultivate patience, emotional balance, and thoughtful decision-making. Yet those who have mastered self-regulation, the ability to control one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in the face of temptation, stress, or adversity, have a distinct advantage. In fact, self-regulation is quickly becoming one of the most valuable skills for success and fulfillment in life. It's the new superpower, one that allows us to thrive in the midst of uncertainty, to navigate challenges with composure, and to create the life we truly desire. Self-regulation is not about repressing emotions or ignoring discomfort. Rather, it's about learning to manage and channel our responses in a constructive way. It involves the ability to pause before reacting, to recognize emotional triggers, and to make conscious decisions that align with our long-term goals rather than succumbing to momentary impulses. At its core, self-regulation is about understanding the gap between stimuluses and response and choosing to act in ways that serve our higher purpose. One of the most important components of self-regulation is emotional awareness. To regulate our emotions, we first need to understand them. Emotions are powerful and often instinctive. They arise from a deep, subconscious part of our brain and can influence our behavior before we even have the chance to think. This is especially true in situations of stress, anger, or fear, where our emotional responses can be overwhelming. However, by cultivating emotional awareness, we become more attuned to the signals our emotions are sending us. This awareness allows us to identify when we're being triggered, which in turn helps us manage our reactions more effectively. When we become aware of our emotions, we gain the ability to respond rather than react. For example, imagine a situation where you feel frustrated during a meeting. Without self-regulation, you might lash out, express your frustration in an unproductive way, or internalize the emotion leading to stress. However, with self-regulation, you can pause for a moment and take a deep breath. And decide whether or not expressing that frustration will help the situation. By creating that space between the trigger and the response, you are able to make a choice that serves your interests and the interests of those around you. Self-regulation also involves managing our impulses, which is a skill that's particularly important in today's world of constant distractions. The ability to delay gratification and resist the urge to act on immediate impulses is crucial for achieving long-term success. Whether it's resisting the temptation to procrastinate, avoid difficult conversations, or indulge in healthy habits, self-regulation allows us to prioritize long-term goals over short-term pleasures. This skill is especially important when we are pursuing meaningful personal or professional objectives that require sustained effort and focus. A key aspect of self-regulation is developing mental resilience, the ability to stay focused and maintain composure even when faced with adversity or setbacks. Life is full of challenges, and it's inevitable that we will face obstacles, disappointments, and failures along the way. However, those who possess strong self-regulation are able to maintain a sense of perspective, keeping their emotions in check while navigating these difficulties. Instead of allowing negative emotions to spiral out of control or to derail their progress, They maintain a positive mindset and continue to push forward. They understand that setbacks are a natural part of growth, and they use these moments as opportunities to learn and improve. Self-regulation is also deeply linked to self-control. It's easy to react impulsively when we're tired, hungry, stressed, or overwhelmed. Under these conditions, our self-control can be depleted, making it harder to make rational decisions. However, by developing good habits, setting clear boundaries, and maintaining a healthy lifestyle, we can improve our self-control. Regular exercise, sufficient sleep, and a balanced diet all play a role in strengthening the body's ability to regulate its responses to stress. Furthermore, practicing mindfulness and meditation can help us stay grounded and calm, improving our ability to control our thoughts and emotions in difficult situations. How do we? Another critical element of self-regulation is the ability to set and maintain boundaries. In a world where we are constantly bombarded with external demands, knowing when to say no and how to protect our time and energy is essential. Self-regulation allows us to set clear boundaries around our work, relationships, and personal time, ensuring that we don't overextend ourselves or sacrifice our well-being. It helps us to avoid burnout, to prioritize what truly matters, and to maintain a healthy work-life balance. One of the most profound aspects of self-regulation is its power to build confidence and self-esteem. When we regulate our emotions and actions, we reinforce a sense of self-mastery and control over our lives. Every time we choose to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively, we increase our belief in our ability to handle whatever comes our way. This confidence then spills over into all areas of life, empowering us to take on new challenges, navigate difficult situations, and remain composed under pressure. Self-regulation is not an innate trait. It is a skill that can be developed with practice and intention. It requires patience, self-awareness, and a willingness to make changes in how we respond to the world. The good news is that with consistent effort, anyone can cultivate self-regulation and reap the rewards it brings. The ability to manage our emotions, thoughts, and behaviors is one of the most powerful tools we have for creating lasting success, personal growth, and fulfillment. In a world that is increasingly unpredictable and demanding, self-regulation is the superpower that allows us to remain grounded, focused, and in control. It is a skill that can help us navigate life's challenges with grace, resilience, and a sense of purpose. Emotional dependency is a deeply ingrained pattern that can quietly dictate how we relate to others, how we see ourselves, and how we navigate the world. It often masquerades as love, loyalty, or deep connection, but at its core, emotional dependency is about needing someone else to regulate our internal state. When our sense of worth, security, or happiness hinges on another person's approval, attention, or presence, we lose a fundamental piece of our autonomy. The path to personal freedom requires that we understand this dependency and begin the process of cutting it, not to become isolated or indifferent, but to reclaim our inner authority and develop true emotional resilience. Emotional dependency can show up in subtle ways. It may manifest as needing constant reassurance in relationships, fearing abandonment, or putting others' needs ahead of our own to maintain connection. These behaviors often stem from early life experiences where love and approval were conditional. Over time, the nervous system learns to associate safety and identity with external sources, parents, partners, friends, even authority figures. The message, though rarely conscious, is "Clerg, I am okay only when you approve of me," or "My value is defined by how much you need me." This mindset creates a fragile emotional landscape where stability depends not on internal regulation, but on someone else's actions or feelings. The cost of emotional dependency is high. It limits personal growth, stifles creativity, and leads to cycles of anxiety, jealousy, resentment, and burnout. When we depend on others to feel secure, we become vulnerable to their fluctuations. If they pull away, we spiral. If they're unavailable, we feel abandoned. If they're upset, we take it personally. In this state, we are reactive, not responsive. We're constantly trying to manage our inner world by controlling the outer one. This is not freedom. It's captivity disguised as connection. Cutting emotional dependency doesn't mean withdrawing from relationships or becoming emotionally numb. It means developing the ability to self-soothe, to find stability within, and to relate from a place of wholeness rather than need. This is a skill, not a trait. It involves rewiring the nervous system and shifting the narrative from "I need you to be okay" to "I am okay, and I choose to connect." That distinction is everything. It transforms relationships from codependent contracts into conscious choices. The first step in cutting emotional dependency is awareness. Many people operate from dependency without realizing it. Start noticing where you feel a need for validation or where your emotions seem overly influenced by someone else's mood or behavior. Pay attention to the moments where you feel anxious if someone doesn't respond quickly enough, or when you suppress your own needs to avoid conflict. These are signals that a part of you is outsourcing emotional regulation. Bring curiosity, not judgment, to these patterns. Awareness opens the door to change. The next step is building emotional regulation. This means learning to sit with discomfort rather than escape it or hand it off to someone else. Practices like mindfulness, breathwork, and somatic awareness are invaluable here. When you feel a wave of neediness or panic, instead of reaching out for reassurance, try turning inward. Place a hand on your heart or stomach. Breathe slowly and name what you're feeling without trying to change it. You're teaching your nervous system that it's safe to stay with emotion. That you don't need someone else to fix it. Over time, this builds inner strength. Another important part of this journey is setting and maintaining boundaries. Emotional dependency often erodes boundaries. We say yes when we mean no. We overextend ourselves to avoid disapproval, and we stay silent to keep the peace. Reclaiming autonomy means honoring your limits and expressing your truth, even if it risks discomfort. Boundaries are not walls, they're frameworks for self-respect. Each time you hold a boundary, you reinforce the message that your value is not contingent on someone else's approval or comfort. Additionally, cultivating a sense of purpose and identity outside of relationships is essential. Dependency thrives in a vacuum. When we don't know who we are, we latch on to others to define us. Engage in activities that bring you joy and meaning. Explore your interests, pursue goals, and invest in your own growth. The more anchored you are in your own life, the less susceptible you become to the emotional tides of others. You move from being defined by relationships to being enriched by them. Ultimately, cutting emotional dependency is an act of self-liberation. It allows you to show up in relationships as a whole, grounded individual rather than a fragmented one seeking completion. It creates space for authentic connection where love is given freely, not bargained for. You no longer need others to be your emotional regulators because you've become that for yourself. This is not a detachment from love. It's a deepening of it, because true intimacy begins when two people come together not out of need, but out of choice. Autonomy isn't about isolation. It's about owning your internal state, your choices in your life. When you no longer rely on others to make you feel safe, worthy, or whole, you unlock a deeper strength, one that is calm, clear, and steady regardless of external conditions. That's the power of emotional sovereignty. That's the path to freedom. In a world that increasingly values comfort, convenience, and ease, it's easy to forget that real psychological strength doesn't come from avoiding discomfort. It comes from deliberately stepping into it. True resilience, confidence, and mental toughness are not traits we are born with. They are forged in moments when we choose to engage with the things that challenge us rather than retreat. Deliberate exposure to discomfort is one of the most powerful tools for building psychological immunity, the kind of inner strength that allows us to face life's inevitable stressors with stability, clarity, and confidence. The human brain is wired to avoid pain. From an evolutionary standpoint, this made perfect sense. Avoiding danger, conserving energy, and seeking safety helped our ancestors survive. However, in the modern world, the threats we face are often psychological rather than physical: rejection, failure, embarrassment, uncertainty. While our physical safety might not be at risk, our nervous system still responds as if it is. The heart races, palms sweat, and the impulse to avoid or escape kicks in. But if we follow that impulse every time, we reinforce a pattern of avoidance that weakens our capacity to tolerate discomfort. Over time, we become more fragile, not less. Deliberate exposure flips this pattern on its head. It involves intentionally placing yourself in situations that are slightly outside your comfort zone over and over again in controlled and mindful ways. This might look like speaking up in meetings when you'd rather stay silent, having difficult conversations you normally avoid, taking cold showers, facing your fears head on, or practicing stillness in the presence of emotional discomfort. These acts are not about suffering for the sake of it. They are about training your nervous system to stay grounded in the face of perceived threat. Every time you do something difficult and remain present through the discomfort, you send a signal to your brain, I can handle this. That message is incredibly powerful. It rewires your stress response. Instead of spiraling into panic, your brain begins to interpret discomfort as a challenge, not a danger. This shift changes everything. Rather than reacting impulsively or shutting down when stress arises, you learn to stay composed. This composure doesn't eliminate pain or anxiety. It gives you a buffer, a moment of pause in which you can choose your response. That pause is the essence of psychological immunity. It's not the absence of discomfort. but the presence of capacity. An important aspect of deliberate exposure is that it must be gradual and intentional. The goal is not to overwhelm the system, but to expand its tolerance. Just as lifting weights builds muscle by gradually increasing resistance, exposing yourself to psychological stress in manageable doses strengthens your mental and emotional resilience. The discomfort becomes data. Information your nervous system can process and adapt to. You begin to see discomfort not as a threat, but as a teacher. With repetition, situations that once triggered anxiety or avoidance begin to feel less intense. Your window of tolerance expands, and so does your confidence. One of the most valuable outcomes of this practice is the increase in self-trust. When you avoid discomfort, you subconsciously send yourself the message that you can't handle it. But when you face it deliberately, even in small ways, you build an internal reputation with yourself. You become someone who shows up, someone who can be counted on. This builds this integrity between intention. That integrity is the foundation of inner strength. It allows you to move through life with a grounded sense of agency, even when external conditions are chaotic or uncertain. Another crucial benefit of deliberate exposure is emotional flexibility. Many people experience emotional discomfort, like sadness, anger, or fear, and immediately try to suppress or fix it. But avoidance only strengthens the intensity of those emotions over time. By allowing yourself to feel discomfort without needing to escape it, you learn that emotions, no matter how intense, are temporary. You become more emotionally agile, less likely to be hijacked by your feelings, and more able to respond to life with clarity and composure. This process also leads to a deeper sense of purpose. When we're constantly chasing comfort, we often make choices based on what feels easy rather than what is meaningful. But when we develop a tolerance for discomfort, we become free to pursue goals that stretch us. We stop fearing the challenges associated with growth and begin to welcome them as necessary steps on the path to mastery. Whether it's building a career, cultivating meaningful relationships, or healing from past trauma, discomfort often the price of progress. When we stop resisting it, we unlock the potential to live more fully and more freely. Building psychological immunity through deliberate exposure is not about becoming invincible. It's about becoming adaptable. It's about learning to hold steady when life gets turbulent, knowing that you've trained for this. It's the realization that strength doesn't mean you never feel fear or pain. It means you're not ruled by them. You face what's in front of you with steady breath, clear mind, and grounded presence. That is real strength. That is freedom. And it's cultivated one deliberate step into discomfort at a time.